human beings are driven by story. But what is story?
Stories are metaphors for life. Without story, life is unlivable.
There's no one better, literally no one on the planet more expert when it comes to the subject of story than Robert McKee.
Stories are equipment for living. You see the full spectrum of life beyond anything we could possibly live by the thousands.
Robert is a master of the form who wrote the definitive book on the subject called, of course, Story. But he's best known as the most sought-after screenwriting teacher in the world.
The wonderful thing about Story is it's a museum. And you can go back, to the greatest of writers. It's all there waiting for you. And every one of those great works is as valid today as it was when it was written.
We discussed his friendship with Steven Pressfield, who tagged along for the experience, which was great. We talked about Robert's philosophy of teaching story, what stories are, why they're important for humanity, and just so much more, including the absolutely incredible behind-the-scenes story of how Succession's Brian Cox ended up portraying McKee in the Oscar-nominated film Adaptation.
I don't have any bloody use for it.
So with that, let's type interior podcast studio day into our screenwriting software document, hit enter, and enjoy this unforgettable conversation with screenwriting legend Robert McKee. Robert, it's an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to hold you captive here today. So many questions for you.
Yes.
You're somebody I've revered and followed and respected from afar for a very long time. I've got my copy of Story here, as you can tell. It's been through some times here. It's well worn
like
and
first
faded.
Edition. I
think it was 90. I don't know
97.
what year. Yeah, I think it was 97 when I got this book.
Yeah,
I got it when it came out.
First year. Right.
Yeah, and I dug it out today. I've read it many times. So you've rented space in my head for quite some time, and it's a pinch me moment to have you here. And we also have Steve Pressfield here as well. I love the fact that you guys are friends. That makes sense to me. It's beautiful to see you guys together. And we're here on the precipice of the conclusion of your career teaching these seminars. You've been doing this for like 50 years?
40.
40 years? You got a couple more dates and then that's a wrap?
Yeah. I started doing these in the when I was 40 years ago, when I was in my early 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And it took over my life in a way, in a real way.
Yeah.
And put my life in a whole different trajectory. And this fall will be the farewell tour of the. This is the last time I'll do LA, New York, London,
mm-hmm.
and I'm going to do Budapest.
Mm.
And the government's invited me there, as has the Israelis, and so I'll be in Tel Aviv as well. And so that's 3 days or 4 days if I do genres, the way we do them here in LA and New York and London. And so it's going out on a high note.
On a high note, yeah. I mean, how are you feeling about it? Is it bittersweet? Are you excited for it to be in the rearview mirror, the end of this chapter? And what does the next chapter look like?
I really can't say until it's over and I look back and whether there'll be any regret.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so. I know it's going to be sad. I mean, without question.
Yeah.
Half of my life has been consumed with this teaching and developing the seminars, and not just on story, but on love stories and crime stories,
mm-hmm.
and long-form television, etc. And now what I'm doing is I'm writing story 2, and I just published, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, the action book.
A book on the action genre.
Right.
And but the next one is I'm going to take story, which is still selling. It's amazing, but it hasn't lost a step. And after 25 years, and but I've learned a lot in 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to do story 2, which will be a different angle on story. And I'm going to look at it emphasizing creative spectrums. What
does that mean?
Every element that a writer wrestles with can be seen on a spectrum of choices. So you can be as minimalist as you want or as maximalist as you want, and every variation in between.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell the whole story over a kitchen table between 2 characters, or you can do, Game of Thrones.
Right.
Okay? And you can be as realistic as you want, or as unrealistic, non-realistic, fantasied as you wish. And you can stretch reality from the most naturalistic to the most fantastic. And so every element of story it can be imagined as on a spectrum of choices, from the most to the least, from the biggest to the smallest, to the brightest to the darkest, and on it goes. Because what I want to convey in story 2 is choices.
Mm.
People, I went out of my way, and when I wrote story 1, to introduce the book and say, look, this is not a book on how to tell a story. This is a book on what a story is. And you need to understand all the elements of story, their relationships, and how they combine to create a story, and that the possibilities are endless. Well, that's not how people often read the book.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to be told how to. And so even though I say I'm not going to teach you how to, they still want to think, okay.
Right.
So now story 2, because I understand they're desperate. It's monumental, this task of making sense out of life. And to do it in a way that has insight and power and beauty and moves us emotionally and makes us laugh. It's frightening when a young writer thinks I'm going to tell a story.
Sure. They want you to hold their hand and walk them through the process of the doing, right? And you, being a hard-boiled son of a bitch, quickly disabuses those people of that idea.
Even, that only seems to encourage them to go, yes, he's being tough, but I'm determined, and so tell me how.
Right.
All right. So I decided in story 2, I'm going to be very clear. There will still be people who will read it as a manual. There's nothing I can do about that. If they want it to be a manual, then it's going to be a manual for them. Okay. But I'm going to be very, very clear in story 2 that it's choices. And story 2, like the books I've done on character and dialogue, after story 1, I decided I'm not going to teach for screenwriters only.
Mm-hmm.
I never wanted to in the first place. In fact, I had a fight with my publisher, Judith Regan, HarperCollins.
Yeah, iconic.
Yes, queen of the bestsellers, and over the title. And she wanted me to call it screenwriting.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, no, I don't want to call it screenwriting. I will use films for the most part as examples because that's what people know. And I'll put screenwriting in the subtitle. But what I want to teach is story, and I'm going to call it story.
Mm-hmm.
So we did that. So story 2 will be for stage, page, and screen.
Got it. So story 2 isn't an upending of the principles that are set forth in story. It is story being, the what, and story 2 being a little bit of the how, but more an expansion of the principles elaborated in story.
No, I hope it's less of the how. You see, when you say to someone, this is what it is. Okay? These are the elements, these are the relationships, these how they work together to create whatever. If I was teaching music, I'd say, this is the 12-note scale. These are chords, right? This is beats, this is rhythm, right? These are the components of music. You would never for a moment think that, oh, now I can compose music.
Sure.
Somebody explained me the elements of music. Okay.
Yeah.
If you were teaching painting, you'd say, this is the rule of thirds, this is perspective, this is the psychology of color, these are the components of anything that goes inside of a rectangle.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And nobody would think, oh, now I can be an artist. But for some reason, when you say these are the components of story, people think, oh, now I will follow that in some kind of prescriptive way, and now I can tell story.
Mm-hmm.
And what they discover is, no, they can't.
Mm-hmm.
The mastery of these elements and in conquering this form takes years, trial and error, success and failure, and mostly failure. And it's really, really difficult. And that, so they don't last.
Right. The dilettantes get weeded out.
Right.
Yeah.
So story 2 is going to make it even clearer than story 1, just how how much variety of choices you have in every single aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to write, and I'm also going to use the clearest, simplest language I can create.
Mm.
I want that when they read the book, that just lights go on.
Story is such an interesting terrain to explore and very tricky and elusive because story operates, as part of the fabric of what it means to be human. Like everybody is familiar with story. We all are on some level, some version of a storyteller. We tell stories about ourselves and who we think we are. We tell stories to our friends. It is in so many ways a big part of what makes us human. And yet the deconstruction of what story actually is and the elements of it are very difficult to understand. And there's a huge difference between, the story you tell your friend and really mastering the form and the art of what it means to tell a great story. So, maybe I want to disabuse people of the idea that this is going to be a conversation just for screenwriters or writers. Like, I want to talk more broadly about how story operates in our lives and why it's important to kind of understand story and how that relates to, the human condition.
Stories are, first of all, metaphors for life. And so unlike music, which is only dealing with sound, poetry, which is dealing with feelings, painting, which is dealing with what you can see or imagine, abstract or concrete. Story is bigger than all that. And it's a metaphor for life. And so as complex and difficult as life is to understand, naturally, story which is trying to be expressive of life is needless to say difficult to accomplish. And I've gotten to a point now where I don't think we have a story problem anymore.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, I see these wonderful TV series,
Mm-hmm.
not so many films, but, and I read some superb novels now. I mean, the great novels have always been around, but I see great storytelling, especially streaming, long form.
Sure.
And so I think, I think I've had some effect. I think I've helped. I hope I have. But it seems to me that the quality of storytelling, certainly on the television, is better than ever.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable what's happening. I mean, I'm reluctant to even call it television. I don't know what you call it now, streaming, whatever, long form.
Because television has that, it's an old word, and it has all kinds of associations.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems to me that the quality of storytelling is as good now or better now than it's ever been. That's not the problem. The problem is content.
So how do you differentiate content from story? Meaning there's a glut of non-quality content out there that makes it difficult to find the gems.
I mean,
the signal in the
why
noise.
are we so disappointed in it when we go to the movies these days?
Yeah, the movies are
They're
not so great.
about anything.
Yeah, the real storytelling is in the long form, where you can create so much dimension in these characters and allow a story to breathe and be told in the tempo that the story wants to be told with that space. And it's been remarkable. And I was thinking about how this has come to be. Obviously, there's technology reasons with streaming. And there's been an increasing openness on behalf of networks and studios to, explore this. I mean, the BBC was doing this for a long time before it was happening in America.
Well, I've had writers that I've worked with who write for HBO, for example. And back when HBO was just beginning and developing, becoming what it is, the people at HBO realized that that the network television had captured the family. And so in order to create an audience for HBO, they had to be anti-family.
Mm.
And so I have friends who would go in there and pitch stories at HBO, and the note they would get over and over again is, not dark enough. Now, if you really want to get a writer excited, give them that note. Not dark enough. Okay?
Do you really mean that?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they did.
Mm-hmm.
And out came, the long form really developed first in HBO's setting the standard. The reason that long form television is become what it has, I think it's the future, and I think that this century will see magnificent storytelling, and that these long form works will be the cathedrals of the 21st century. And the reason that they are so wonderful so often, there's a lot of crap too, but still. What does the audience want? What does a reader want? What keeps them turning a page? What keeps them coming back episode after episode? What sustains, some of the long form series are 100 hours. 50, well, is normal. Two things, revelation and change. And so they're fascinated as what we just watched some wonderful series lately, Peaky Blinders.
That's fantastic.
Finally got around to it, and it was just great.
Yeah.
You watch this to see who these people really are. And so you see their surface and their outer behaviors, and then episode after episode, you see their dimensions. And a dimension is a contradiction, in a consistent contradiction in a character. So in one relationship, he's really kind. In another, he's incredibly cruel. And so he's both. He's capable of being both loving and gentle and vicious and kind, right? Depending, right? Does smart, clever things and makes terrible mistakes and does stupid things, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so those contradictions create dimensions. And as you're watching the series, you see that these, in long form, these are not three-dimensional characters. These are 10, 12, 15-dimensional characters, literally. And you sit there and study the character and you break down every single dimension within them over 50 hours, and you see the three-dimensional characters. A three-dimensional character is a supporting role.
Yeah.
So the people want to see that revelation. Because who is this person? And so the complexity of characters long form demands complex characters, because you need to reveal who they really are over years to keep the interest and change. Is this character going to arc from where they started to where they end? And if they, and so we want to see how and why people change. Long form, in order to sustain years of series, has to have extremely complex characters, multidimensional, of the extreme kind, and capable of change. And that's why that is so satisfying.
Sure. It operates like a Russian novel, in the classic sense.
Well, I've looked at certain novels, Russian and otherwise, and I've said, if this was a series, what would War and Peace? War and Peace, if it were a series, would be season 1. And that's all. War and Peace is just 6 or 8 principal characters, family relationships and love relationships, played out against the background of Europe in turmoil. It's War and Peace, for God's sakes, right?
Yeah.
But it's only got enough material for one 12-episode season. And so even the most huge 1,000-page novels would be consumed inside of a long-form series.
Right. It appears to me that things started to change. The first real network show that kind of broke the mold of what episodic television could be, to my mind, was Lost, because it was telling a longer story. It took big swings. It didn't always follow through or connect properly on some of those swings, but it was taking risks and it was telling a longer story. And because it was successful, it was signaling to the networks and the studios, that this could work. And then that, is sort of matured in the cable universe with The Sopranos and Breaking Bad and The Wire, David Chase and Vince Gilligan, who were telling these long stories, who understood on some level, like, that there was this broader arc and that these characters were going to land in a very different place from where they began. But with that also came the advent of the anti-hero as the protagonist, right? Which is different from Lost and has become a staple of, serious, dramatic, long-form storytelling. So, why do you think, why have we embraced the anti-hero? Why has, the bad guy taken a more center? And I'm saying, I don't mean that in a perfunctory way. I realize there's multi-dimensions to all of these characters, but in a sense, it is a different type of character that all of us as audience members have really gravitated towards and connected with, which feels different than prior decades.
Well, the length helps, and the size of the cast also helps, because where an audience places their empathy is in relationship to everything that's around it. And so when an audience or a reader enters a novel or film or TV series, whatever, instinctively, they go in search of the center of good. They want some positive glow, some positive quality in a major character that causes them to think the thought, like me. She's like me. He's like me. Okay? And that positive glow at the center is in relationship to everything that's around it. So like in The Sopranos, if you surround Tony with mobsters, the FBI who's lying and cheating and whatnot, if you surround him with a darker world, and you see that he's troubled, that he has panic attacks, and he's terrified of something he doesn't understand, the audience goes, panic attack, just like me. These things, I have these moments, I have that. He's vulnerable. He's a gangster, but he's vulnerable just like me. And so he becomes the center of good, right? Because your empathy has to go somewhere.
Right. And generally, these anti-heroes are living by a certain code. And that might not be the code that we would choose for our own lives, but they have rules.
Code's a code.
Yeah. And, often it's, family first or whatever it is.
Yep.
And it's very important that they not violate that code. And within the strictures of that code, there is a certain goodness that you can identify, or a humanity.
Yeah. And somebody who has some code, as you say. There's something that they would risk their life for. There's some standard that they would hold, even if it's long before Tony Soprano, there was The Godfather, and we're used to empathizing with gangsters in that sense. I mean, right? Hollywood's done that for decades,
Sure.
And so you paint a darker world, you turn on a light in the middle of it, and there's some positive quality, like I have a private code, and we go, yeah, just like me, I too have a code, and so they empathize with some really difficult, complex, troubling characters. I think that's a huge part of it, is that the writing is so good. They know how to sculpt the positive and negative charges in a cast and create this glow at the middle. That's one thing. But I also think since the 70s, 80s, society in general is slowly waking up to what a corrupt world we live in.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the first big surprise film for that was Chinatown.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that the writers who are creating these great series like The Wire and 6 Feet Under, is a great series,
Right.
Boardwalk Empire, right? We're actually 10 years behind society. People always ask, do writers lead society do they create things that people then emulate, whatever, or does society does it happen first in society, and the writers are attuned to that, and that is my point of view. It happens first in society, because the forces of society are so titanic that culture and the economics and the politics of things are too huge to be led anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so writers, I think, are people who are very sensitive to what's happening in the world. And so when they start showing the dark side, people responded positively to it because they already knew it was there. And they go, yes, that's life. That's who we are now. That's our, whatever. And that, even to this day, however, that audience that is willing to admit what a corrupt world it really is limited.
Prophets walk among us. As a writer and podcaster for nearly 10 years, I've become more convinced than ever that our world is populated by scores of beautiful and brilliant people who have amazing stories to share. Those that we don't know, who can teach us something new and leave us all the better for the experience of their sharing. And so I've dedicated my career to tracking down the most compelling prophets on the planet, going deep with each of them on my podcast to elucidate the best of what they have to offer and to sharing the insights gleaned for the benefit of all. But the podcast is not the only medium by which to share their stories, which is why I'm proud to announce the release of my new book, Voicing Change Volume 2. More than mere words on paper, Voicing Change is a physical manifestation of the magic, inspiration, and timeless wisdom that transpires each week on the Rich Roll podcast. The first edition of Voicing Change was a beautifully rendered book worthy of display on any coffee table. And Volume 2 follows in that tradition by showcasing even more of my favorite conversations in an elegant publication replete with interview excerpts, essays, and stunning photography, making for an exquisite companion to the first volume or a satisfying standalone work. Picking up this book allows you to revisit the wisdom of your favorite everyday prophets and physically interact with the life-changing ideas contained within. Voicing Change Volume 2, available now while supplies last for a limited time. Order your copy today only at richroll.com. So here we are now in an era in which, basically the anti-hero reigns supreme. And culturally, I was talking to Steve the other day, chatting with him about like what we might talk about. And one of the things that he brought up that I think is super interesting, and it's a big part in the new book, Action, is about the ascension of the quote unquote, for better or worse, like the bad guy. And we're in this kind of bad guy era in many ways. Trump is sort of a classic villain, and the narratives that we see being spun in popular culture and in politics are, about what Trump is doing. And we have Putin and all of these kind of, they're like titanic bad guys, right? And, in some ways, like, how is that reflected in the writing that we're seeing?
30% of the American public thinks that Trump descended from heaven, and he's here to lead us.
So what is going on?
The other 70% are not so. Yeah. But there's 30% of Americans who really believe that he is the hero, not an anti-hero.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so, but yeah, the majority of people, to some degree, see it for what it is. When Trump was elected, I know Michael Moore was saying before the election, he's going to get elected.
He was calling it very early.
Right. And we're both from Michigan, and so is Michael Moore, right?
Yep.
And I've always known this since I was a kid, growing up in the suburbs of Detroit. I'm not sure it was the same everywhere in America, but as kids, we thought that abusive alcoholic fathers was normal. But nobody ever said that. Nobody ever. Everybody worshiped the family, right? But in the subtext, we all knew that the worst time of your life is your childhood. But we denied it and denied it and denied it. That society, the America's a wonderful country. That we just couldn't face it. But now, it's out there to be seen, and it's so clear.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think storytelling has responded to society's sense that we are not who we pretend to be, and I don't know why we ever thought we were. I mean, I living here in L.A. back when. I used to play golf with some engineers who were working to take this military system of communication into the world that became the internet.
Right.
Yeah. And they were all excited about what they're doing. And they would talk about it constantly over lunch and whatnot, right? And it was fascinating. And they at one point they asked me, what do you think? What do you think of this? I said, it's fascinating. And if what you guys are proposing actually comes true, it will be a perfect mirror of human nature. And they all smiled because these engineers had no idea what human nature is. And the internet and social media are a perfect mirror. The pornography, the cruelty, the meanness of all kinds, crime of all kinds, and they're able to do it anonymously. And so the internet has exposed human nature for what it really is, and they can get away with it for the most part because it's anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
And you see how what
here we are,
sorry creatures, we really are.
Here we are,
and and my feeling is that that's got to be a good thing because the truth is coming out little by little, but the truth is coming out, and people are going to have to live in a reality that they denied throughout history for the most part.
Right. So you're saying basically that gives us a chance, the opportunity to actually reckon with it and perhaps, transcend it, hopefully. It's a macro version of being in denial of the alcoholic father, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You just have to stop pretending.
Right. This is who we are. And
living in reality is, Freud once said, he said, it's impossible to live in reality. He said, just try it. Try for 1 minute to live in absolute, brutal, rock bottom reality for 1 full minute. And he said, within 20 seconds, you'll start to fantasize. He said, it's just too awful. The mind can't bear it. Right? And this is why we write stories.
Well, what is reality? How do you define reality? We're all, operating through the lens of our perception.
Yes.
And our perception, creates the epistemics, the heuristics, by how we make sense of the world, right? And story really is the core functioning operating system for all of that. Like story is uniquely human. It's what makes us who we are, and gives us this framework, right? So let's go back to just defining what story is, and it's curious to me that story and humanity cannot be, they're inextricably linked with each other. We're the one creature on Earth that is really operating on story all the time, and
yes.
stories are functioning in very visible ways, but also in so many invisible ways. And all of that really dictates the decisions that we make and how we kind of function in the world.
When you take an action in life at any moment, you take you always take an action designed to create a positive reaction that will help you get toward what you want, right? I mean, this is as old as Socrates. Mm-hmm. That all human beings act toward the good, or their perception of the good. The worst of people act toward what they perceive to be the good or the positive. I mean, when somebody gets on a school bus with a jacket, dynamite, and blows up himself and all the kids on that bus, that person believes he's doing God's work. Okay? So all human beings act toward the positive. So you always take an action, you certainly do, to create a reaction which will somehow help you toward what you want, even if what you want is to make somebody else feel bad. Mm-hmm. Okay? So you insult people because it's satisfying to watch them suffer for a moment, right? Or you compliment them because you want them to whatever, right? How do you know what to do in order to cause a reaction that will get you a step toward what you want? If you only had your living experience, you wouldn't know what to do. You'd be paralyzed. You wouldn't know what to do. And so how do you know what actions to take in life to get what you want? Because you have been told stories since you were a child. You have read stories as a child. You have seen them countless by the tens of thousands of stories, from everything from TV commercials to Crime and Punishment. That whole stockpile of story is buried in your memory and gives you a sense of, if I do this in these circumstances, that person will take an action that will help me, whatever. Because life without story, life is would be terrifying, unlivable.
There's also something
you wouldn't know what to do.
Right. It's giving you this framework. But I think there's also something unique about story in that it tends to, like, a story well told will live rent-free in your conscious or unconscious mind in perpetuity, right? Like, what is it about a great story well told that can just impact us so profoundly, as opposed to the imparting of the information? Like, you can say to somebody, and this is kind of like, what I do here on the podcast, like some people they're an expert in something, and they'll come in and they'll say, here are the 5 things you should be doing every day, or something like that. And you could take that information, and some people might even act on that. But that's very different from somebody who comes in and tells an incredible story in which those tenets or principles are conveyed that will live with that person and have a much more profound effect, and also more likely to actually get them to change their behavior than a listicle or some bullet points or a PowerPoint or what have you. So, from that, I'm always trying to default to storytelling over just the information. And I can't help but wonder, why is that? What is good? How did we evolve to learn in that way, such that...
Yeah, neuroscientists have been looking at this for at least 40 or 50 years now. And what they've come to understand is that the mind is a story-making machine. The mind takes its experience at every moment and is narratizing everything that happens to it. And so its understanding of reality is based upon the stories that it has told itself. Mm-hmm. and it's why we human beings are able, to rule the world as we do, is because we can take raw experience and do, first of all, look into the subtext and ask the question, why? Why did that just happen? And your mind penetrates that and says, it recognizes there must have been a force in there. There must have been a need. She wanted this. He wanted that. This business wants that. The government wants that. There's these desires going inside, and they're motivating these behaviors. And these forces are hidden underneath, and then they manifest themselves in a behavior. But if you track back to it, you discover the reasons why.
Mm-hmm.
No animal ever asks why. Only human beings ask why.
Right?
And that human beings are like that little annoying 5-year-old who says, "Why, Daddy? Why? The major question out of the mouth of kids is why. They want to understand causality. They want to understand how one thing causes another, how that effect then becomes a cause, it triggers another effect, and they want to understand the interconnectedness of life. They want to understand why. Stories express why. At the end of a story, you understand, if it's well told, why these characters, these metaphors for human beings, did what they did. What they wanted, why they wanted it, how they went about trying to get it. And so the story educates you on the hows and whys of things.
Perhaps most profound of the stories that impact our lives, for better or worse, are the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. We're all walking around with some version of a locked-in narrative, right? That either liberates us or imprisons us, probably imprisons us, and probably is working in disservice.
Yeah,
how do you think
also
about
known
that?
as self-deception. Okay.
Yeah, none of these stories are true, whether they're good or bad. They're all illusions.
Well,
but
true in the sense they're not factual.
yeah,
They may have a real truth in them, however, about why we did what we did. But we're all, yes, trying to make sense out of our own life. And we go back and with regret often.
Mm-hmm.
Why did I do that? Why didn't that work? Why did I fail at that? Or was I just lucky? I mean, we're trying to make sense out of our own life. And so we tell ourselves stories out of our memories. And the stories that we tell ourselves are very selective.
Yeah.
And deceptive.
So what's the story that you tell yourself about yourself?
Some years ago, I was lecturing in Spain, and a journalist there asked me a question nobody had ever asked me, which was, because I'd probably, by this time, I'd been lecturing for at least, 25 years. And he asked me why. He said, "Why do you do this? Why do you travel? He said, you must have made enough money by now. Mm-hmm. Why do you keep traveling the world, trying to help people compose insightful, honest stories for page, stage, and screen? Why? Why do you do this?" And I had to think, because I had never, until he asked me that question, I had never really thought to ask myself that. And I said, well, very little in life, very little, is meaningful. It's random. It's far more random than we want to believe.
But meaning is a function of choice. You can attribute meaning to anything
is something that we give to something else.
Yeah.
It's as what I was saying was there is no intrinsic meaning to life. It is a biological accident that occurred on this planet, maybe others, but there is no intrinsic meaning.
That's
But
some
that
dark
doesn't mean
shit.
it's not the same thing as saying life is meaningless. There is no intrinsic meaning, but you, as the existentialists used to teach, you have to find your project. You
Right.
have to find out what gets you up in the morning, what's your purpose in life. You have to give your life meaning, and you have to do it yourself. If you wait for other people to do it, and you will live an invalid life. It won't be your life. You'll be leading other people's lives. And so I thought, so there's no intrinsic meaning. And so what is my meaning? Why do I do this? And the answer that I gave him was this. No, there is no intrinsic meaning in reality, in life. There is, however, suffering. That's real. Human beings suffer. All living things suffer. That's what it is to be alive, is to suffer. Anything that a person can do to alleviate the suffering in others is a good thing, a positive thing, a meaningful thing. Stories do exactly that. They make life livable. They help alleviate the suffering, because great suffering comes from confusion, from just not understanding things. I don't know why. I don't know why. Why is this happening to me? Who am I? Etc. Those are terrifying things, and you suffer in that confusion.
Right. So it's providing this map of meaning that is giving you an explanation or a better understanding for your own personal struggle, but also making it a shared experience. Like if you're relating to somebody else who's gone through something analogous, you don't feel quite alone, or that your experience is unique from your fellow man.
Yeah, it's not a question of stories don't tell us what we should do. There's a difference between ought and is. We ought to do things. When we have ideals, we understand, we have certain standards that we want to achieve. We have ideals. And we ought to live up to our moral ideals, our artistic ideals, right? We ought to. But then there's is.
Mm-hmm.
There's what is. And stories, great stories, make what is clear. They don't tell you what you ought to do. Lord of the Flies is a magnificent novel about human nature, but it doesn't tell you what you ought to do. It just says, this is human nature.
Right.
This is what is.
Right.
And the more you understand what is, the less suffering you go through, because you're living in reality. You're living in the is rather than the ought. You can still have your ideals and aspirations as long as they're not, full of hope.
Right. Well, extrapolating on that idea of suffering as being fundamental and a primary aspect of the human condition. I've heard you speak many times about the idea of life being a struggle, right? You bristle at this notion that describe life as a journey.
I hate that word.
Hate that. And I want to kind of understand this a little bit better, and perhaps you can indulge me in pushing back a little bit.
Life is not a journey.
So let's deconstruct that a little bit.
Journey is a California word, and there are many share. You just can't tell anybody anything in California. You must share it with them.
Well, here we are in California.
Sharing.
Yes. And we're gonna share some ideas on this. I mean, the way I look at it is, journey, the word journey itself is a very broad word. It's also somewhat neutral, whereas
it's not.
Struggle.
It should be. It should be. You're right. It should be neutral.
Journey it can be negative or positive. Right? It doesn't exist on an extreme of the polarities.
if you want to define it that way, but that's not how people use it.
They use it as something aspirational.
As a euphemism. Euphemisms are words to protect us from reality. We don't call it shit. We call it number 2. Okay?
I got you. I follow.
We use euphemisms because we can't face reality. It's too ugly. It's too awful. It's what it is, and it's painful. And so we want to live in a like I said, denial, as psychologists have pointed out since forever. Denial makes the world go round, and journey is a word that makes it possible to deny the truth. If you say life is a journey, a journey is you get on a bus in Cleveland and it takes you to Chicago and you sit there watching the countryside go by. That's a journey. Life is not like that. It's a struggle and uphill. It's Sisyphus in that rock.
Yeah, but it's also all the beautiful colors of the rainbow. Like, here's my point. And hear me out. Let me just finish this thought. So I do think journey is a broader term that, struggle is very connotative and somewhat reductive in a negative sense. Like, struggle, of course, is part of the journey. It's an essential part of it, but doesn't the word journey also make room for the spectrum of experiences, from joy to love and celebration and heartbreak and setbacks and conflict? It's all of it, right?
It could be, but that's the journey not how people use the word.
Okay. I'm using
They use it to avoid
I get your
the realization
I what you're saying.
that it's a bitch. It's not easy. It's hard. People are terrible much of the time. You have to deal with people. I mean, one of the best things that come out of the pandemic is people are now working at home and they're so pleased to be working at home. Why? Because they don't have to be around other people. It's as simple as that, right? And so, yeah, I know. But look, I teach writers. It's very important, from my point of view, that writers use a truthful, precise language, that they do not indulge in euphemisms. Because if they use euphemisms in their own mind, how can they possibly interpret reality in an honest, truthful way? And celebrate it when it needs celebration, and lament it when it doesn't, right? But if writers use words to separate themselves from reality, how in the world could they ever write anything that would bring the audience or the reader into contact with reality? And so that's why I get, I get, peevish. I know it's boring. But,
no, it's not boring. I love it. I mean,
it's not idle. I mean, I don't like the word hope much. Hope is the denial of reality. If you really think about the possibility of me achieving what I want to achieve, what are the odds? I mean, there's a possible you could get what you want, but the chances are you won't.
But it's also the engine of tackling and overcoming obstacles, right? You can't face, dire or tragic circumstances without you can't get into action without some sliver of hope that you'll be able to navigate it and get to the other side.
There's a difference between expectation and hope. I mean, or anticipation and hope. And that's just because if people use the word hope in the same way that they use the word anticipation or expectation, I'd be fine.
Sure.
Right?
So
but when people are going through hell and then somebody says, well, there's always hope.
Right. No, I understand that. That's greeting card bullshit.
Yeah, right.
I understand what you're saying. Right. I mean, fundamentally, what you're getting at is honesty, right? Like, how can we strip away artifice and really, pull the covers on reality? And use writing and story as a means of elucidating the human condition in its truth, right? And that's the core of great writing, whatever story it is you're trying to tell.
See, if a writer is going to fault one way or another, I would rather that they fault toward cynicism, certainly skepticism, than fault toward optimism, hope, and everything's going to turn out all right, happy endings.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, it's not that you can't have a positive ending if the characters earn it.
You have to earn it. Yeah, that's the difference.
Right? But again, the happy endings is a commercial imperative.
Yeah. Well, any audience member knows, whether they're conscious of it or not, the difference between a happy ending earned and one that's saccharine and, kind of slapped on top of it. And you leave, like, maybe you even feel good.
Did you watch the series Leftovers?
Oh, I made a list because I wanted to talk about my favorite Longform shows, and that's up at the top. Like, I just think...
And that ending...
It's one of the greatest.
It's one of the most powerful, beautiful endings of anything I've ever experienced in my life. And those characters have earned that love in that moment. And so it's a positive ending, but it isn't a happy ending in the Hollywood sense of the word. It is a positive ending. They've reached something worthy in their lives, something of real quality in their lives, but they've been through hell to get there. And it's an honest ending, positive and honest.
Yeah.
And so I'm not against happy endings. I'm just against the sentimentality.
Sure. Who out there is really killing it? Like, who in your mind is really doing the great work right now? What have you enjoyed or consumed recently that you think really rises above?
I mentioned Peaky Blinders. I just finished that.
Yeah.
I thought that was wonderful. But that's from like 5 years ago, right? 6.
Well, I think the most recent season was recently this past year.
That's true. That's true. When people ask that question, who knows what, I tell you a series that has stuck with me for the last year or two or whatever. And it's called Made.
I don't think I've seen that.
M-A-I-D, Made. And I just loved it. And it did okay. It got some nominations and so forth. It's about a single mom and her I don't know if they were ever actually married. I don't think they were, but they were, living together. Is an alcoholic and abusive, and she takes her kid, and she's never had a job. She has almost no education, and she's thrown into the world, and she gets a job cleaning houses. And over the course of the series, grows as a human being, just figures out how things work, how she works, what her real values are. She's got a crazy mother and all the rest of it. Until finally she gets herself to college. Positive, happy ending, but she really earned it. And why does that series pop to mind when you ask that question? I can only say that I think it's wonderfully done, as usual, beautifully acted. But that's everything now. I mean, the actors as a community of artists are 10 years ahead of the writers. Every time you turn on a TV series, you see these wonderful performances, and you say, "Where'd they come from?" but I think the reason it got me is that that's a world I don't know. Single mom, cleaning houses, and the writing was so terrific. Earnest writing. There's some scenes in there that deal with hoarders. I've known one hoarder in my life, a mother-in-law I had some time ago, and they decide then some hoarder decides to clean up their house, but they can't do it themselves. I mean, they're not emotionally able, right? So they get a cleaning company, and or a house is going to be put up for sale, and so the realtor brings in a cleaning company to make that house sparkle for the buyers, and the cleaners see what the previous owners, how they lived and how they left it. I mean, there was insights there into lower middle class, lower class, from an angle through the eyes of people who have to clean up the mess that people leave. And at the same time, she's growing as a character and evolving based on a true story, based on a factual story. I'd never seen anything. I've never experienced anything like that. And so I thought it was terrific. And, nobody knows it.
Yeah, so, I know. I thought I'd seen all the great long forms out there.
Well,
so
it's not that long. I mean, it's one season. It's like 8 episodes.
All right.
I always hesitate over that question because you get judged by your answer. So if I like the Norseman, okay, all that mayhem, right? People say, that's these. Yeah.
Right, you're gonna get pigeonholed. I get it. I mean,
so
I think
I like the Maid too, but I also like the Norseman. So it's the choices are wonderful today. I mean, the Good Fight is coming back. And my judgment, the greatest TV series of all is Better Call Saul. Breaking Bad,
all time, more than Sopranos, more than Breaking Bad, Mad Men, all of that.
Time.
Wow.
Okay, no. Now I say, Better Call Saul is the greatest TV series ever written. Okay, and then somebody turns on episode 1 on my recommendation, and they find this crazy Jimmy McGill and his mean-spirited brother and all the rest of it, and it just bores them to death, right? And then you're going to say, well, who is this expert McKee? What the hell does he know? So I just say, look, explore, get Netflix and HBO and Prime and the usual Hulu and all the usual suspects, and go looking. And when you something captures you, if it really works for you, you're going to have a quality of experience, a depth and breadth of experience in long form television that no human beings ever had prior to the 21st century.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
This is what we're creating now is breathtaking, and unlike, it surpasses in its density and its complexity and powers much of everything that we've ever. I mean, there's still Shakespeare, and there's
sure. I mean, it's where all the talent and the great work is happening right now.
But now we are very fortunate to live in a world where the quality of and insights into character, insights into society, what's right and wrong with our society, are really astute. And I I can't keep up with it.
Yeah, there's too much.
It's too much.
All the foreign language stuff too. There's amazing foreign
Yes,
language.
if you start
long
looking,
form.
if you're willing to read subtitles and you see all
Yeah.
the stuff that's coming out of Denmark and Sweden
Yeah.
and
Oregon, Le Bureau from
Yeah.
France was unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, let's shift gears here a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, when you with all of the amazing writers that you've mentored and worked with over the years, I mean, to your mind, what distinguishes good from the greats? Like when you think of William Goldman, who was a student of yours and is a friend of yours, like what makes him that much better than someone, just 10% less successful? Like what is the edge
Talent.
that makes the great people great?
It's talent.
And what is that? How does that talent translate
and it
onto
has
the page? Like,
nothing
what
to
are
do
they doing?
with me. I cannot. I teach what I teach. People take it and use it as they will. And the fact that certain students of mine are really the highest water is a question of talent.
Mm-hmm.
And to understand, you can define talent. It's really simple. Talent, creative talent, is the discovery of the third thing. A talented person over on the right side of their brain, they have a faculty, a creative IQ. Your conventional IQ is over on your left side. This is simplistic, but
Yeah.
But the creative IQ is certain people have the power to discover the hidden connection between two things that already exist, but a third thing that connects them in a way no one else has ever thought before.
So what would be an example of
Analogical logic. Example I often give in class is that little poem that you read in junior high school, I think it is. It's called The Fog. Carl Sandburg's The Fog. And there's a phrase in there where it says the fog rolled in, the fog, I think it's moved, I forget. But the fog moved in on little cat's feet. Fog is weather. Cat's feet is an animal. There is no necessary relationship between them. But Sandberg found a relationship between fog and cat's feet, and when he puts it together in that simile, like cat's feet, a third thing is born into the world, which is the relationship between fog and cat's feet. That's creativity. It's analogical logic. It's the discovery of the hidden connection. It's a delusional to think that you create from nothing. You cannot make something out of nothing. What artists do is they take what is and they find connections between all of what is, and they fuse them into third things that are wonderful or beautiful and enriched somehow when they do it really well.
Right. And with the kind of hidden piece there also is that it has to be true, right? Like that idea of the fog and the cat's feet, when you contemplate that,
it wasn't apt,
it not only elevates like the visceral experience of that, innately, like, oh yeah, that is what it is.
Absolutely. And that's, when someone's writing and they're reaching for a metaphor, or a metaphor comes to mind and they try it out and they go, no, that's not right. And so they look for another one, different, right? And out of 10, they might find one that is really fresh and true. And that's the one they use.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not as if these tropes of language just fall out of the brain. They most of what falls out of the brain is worthless. So and you have to have taste and judgment as to know what's.
So how do you think about the idea of the muse, though, like the unseen, inspiration and the mystical art of drawing down upon imagination?
Steve Pressfield and I
I might find the tension in your perspectives here.
He wrote that wonderful book, The War of Art, and I wrote the preface to it. And his publisher asked me to write the preface to it, and I said, I think it's a wonderful book. It's a beautiful book, but I can't buy the Muse. And his publisher said, good, because neither do I. I said, but there is talent. And it is subconscious. And so it seems as if it's coming from outside of you, descending from above, whatever metaphor you want to use, right? But of course, it's coming from you. It's you. You're doing this, nobody else. And if it's a mystery to you, it's because it's subconscious. And
but you know as well as anyone that many a great artist will say, I didn't create this thing. It kind of came through me. Like there's this idea of being, present.
Well, first of all, you have to understand
this receiving
artists. You have to understand the marketing of artists.
Okay.
Right?
Uh-huh.
They want to appear mysterious. We all know, anybody who's worked knows that if you keep 10% of what you write, it's remarkable. More likely something like 5 or 2 or whatever. It's a tiny, tiny percentage of what comes through you that you actually keep. Right? And so they know that, look, what is it to write? What is it actually like?
It's torturous and terrible.
You sit down, a piece of paper, okay, or a screen on your computer, and he says, she says, and you knock out a scene. Takes maybe 10 minutes. Then what do? You read what you've written. And as you read it, you critique it. Oh, shit, that's terrible. I shouldn't. He wouldn't say that, whatever, right? and then you go back and you rewrite it. And then what do? You read it again. And you're searching what works, what doesn't, and most of it still doesn't work. Maybe 1 or 2 things you keep, and then you go back and you rewrite. And if you had a stopwatch at your keypad, the way lawyers do, and kept track of how much time do I spend actually writing a scene, and how much time do I spend critiquing it and playing with it, and then rewriting it, the time you spend critiquing and analyzing is 10 times the time you spent writing it.
Probably more than that.
And probably much more than that. I mean, we've all, written 1 paragraph a day, right? And to come to sit down the next morning and go, a piece of shit, and out that whole paragraph that you spent a whole day on, gone. But if you tell people that, if the writer said, you have no idea how hard it is, man. I spend, maybe, 20 minutes a day creating something that I then spend the next 10 hours savaging, and I often just throw the whole thing out and start all over again. It's really hard work. It's gutty. It drives you crazy, and your guts are in a knot all day long, and that's why we drink, right?
Right.
If you actually said that to people, okay, nobody wants to hear that. What they want to believe is that they were walking down the street and it just descended out of the ether and into me and through me. And it,
I get that. I mean, there's a workmanlike woodshedding of, that dispels the romance and the, mysticism of the whole thing. And the vast majority of writing is painful and hard, and
and
it's
boring.
and boring, right? And
not
and
again.
and lonely and all of that.
All the rest.
But there are those moments of inspiration or temporary flow states where there's a sense of ease about
Of course,
it, right?
of course. And you celebrate those, and you go, at the end of the day, if you've got a decent pass at whatever page that you're working on, and you read it, you go, that's not bad. That's a good day.
Yeah.
No, I lecture, I teach, and I write for writers. And if anybody has to be honest about it, I do.
Yeah.
I can't invite people into this world. Look, somebody decides I'm going to be, get out of college, I'm going to be a writer. They have to be willing to fail for the next 10 years. That's 10 major works, 10 novels, 10 films, 10 plays, 10 of whatever, at least one a year, for the next 10 years, and nobody wants them. That's real, right? And I cannot pretend to my students that you're going to have success by just following this, do that, one thing or another, and it'll flow, and it'll just come down to you and whatever.
Right. No, I get it, and I think that's a big piece in the success of the seminars is the fact that you tell it like it is. Like, this is the truth of the matter. This is a very difficult road.
I'm actually restrained.
Are you? Well, that's a good segue into.
No, I'm actually restrained. If I wanted to.
Listen, I'm finding you to be very gentlemanly here and reserved, and that conjures the scene in Adaptation, which upon seeing that made me intimidated to meet you here today, because that iconic scene sort of precedes you. Can we talk about Adaptation?
Sure, of course.
I mean, first of all, one of my all-time favorite movies, and that sequence and your persona being rendered by Brian Cox so brilliantly in that movie, just lives with me. It's incredible, right? And I know there's a great backstory here. Can you tell that story?
Why Brian Cox? Is that the
just how did this whole thing come
phenomenon?
Together? Yeah.
Oh God.
I know you've told it a million times.
Yeah. I phone rang one day, and it was a producer calling from New York, Ed Saxon, and he said, "We have a problem," and I thought they wanted me to script doctor, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have a problem. I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "Well, we've got this writer, Charlie Kaufman, and he's written a screenplay and made you a character in it. He has freely stolen from your lectures and your book without, obviously, permission, and we don't know what to do."
Well, he knew what to do. He knew he had to call you and get you on board.
I said,
yeah.
Send me the script.
Mm-hmm.
So I read it, and
was that the first? Did you know Charlie Kaufman before that?
No. I
so you didn't know what his particular flavor of right?
And I could see that what he wanted me to be is the villain. He wanted me to represent Hollywood,
right?
And he perceives Hollywood as the villain. And that Hollywood is formulaic, and he perceived me as formulaic,
an insult to his creative genius.
Exactly, but I also realized he needs a villain because otherwise the screenplay sucks.
Right.
It's just masturbation about how awful it is to be a writer, the stuff we were just talking about. And very importantly, the third act sucked. It was awful. So I called Ed Saxon back, and I said, I see what he's up to. And I see your concern because if you go ahead with this project, I will sue you for everything you've got.
Mm.
And he said, well, what do we, I said, well, here's what we're going to do. One, you're going to write a redeeming scene for my character. Two, I have to have say in the casting. And three, there has to be a whole new third act, because the third act sucks and I can't be a character in a bad movie.
How did it originally end? What was the difference?
Susan Orleans shoots a cop.
So it didn't have any of the meta nature of how, okay.
And Charlie Kaufman is a fascinating guy in that and there's many people like him. He's trying for the impossible. He wants to have a commercially successful art movie. He wants art and money.
I respect that, though, and I would argue that he succeeded. He succeeded in that.
I get it.
I mean, some of the, not all of them. Schenectady, there's some.
That's,
right.
But he pretends he only wants to be an artist.
Uh-huh.
In fact, he knows how Hollywood works. He knows if he doesn't make money, he won't be working. And so it's a bit hypocritical. It's a bit, pretentious. But that's okay. I said, okay. I said, so we're going to have meetings.
Uh-huh. So art imitates life, imitates art.
Yeah.
Like what you're doing in the movie, you're now doing for the movie.
Yeah. Well, before I decided to go with it, on my conditions, I talked to two people. I called William Goldman.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Bill, they want to make me a character in a movie. And
let me just interject for a moment. Yeah. Apologies. But for people that don't know, arguably the greatest screenwriter of all time, wrote Butch Cassidy, All the President's Men, Marathon Man.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Certainly the greatest writer of dialogue.
Sure.
In the history of the movies. And he said, don't do it. I said, well, they're going to give me permission on the casting. He said, oh, really? Yeah. Okay, who do you want? I said, Gene Hackman.
Mm.
He said, okay, it'll be Gene Hackman with a big pink bow around his neck. He said, Bob, they're out to get you.
Yeah, no matter how you slice it, you're going to end up
They're going to
get
bad. You. If you let them, they're going to get you. Don't do it. So then I called my son. I said, Paul, and he said, do it. I said, but William Goldman says that, he's a dad. You're going to be a character in a Hollywood film. In fact, I'd already been a character in one film called 20 Dates. He's going to be another character now, but in a major Hollywood film. He said, no matter what, do it. You'll love it. Do it. And so then I called Saxon back and I said, I have to have casting, whatever. And we have to have writers' meetings with me and them. And we got to find a third act and the third act that they came up with, I said, okay. But I knew only half the audience would go with it.
When it pivots towards his brother's version of what a good story is, lifted from what he learned in your seminar, basically.
Yeah, right. And then
I thought it was fantastic.
Well, yeah, but
I think it's one of the great third acts.
But
I mean, it's certainly unique and unlike anything you're ever going to see.
I tell you where the dividing line comes, and in that moment that Meryl Streep's character Susan Orleans says, "We're going to have to kill him."
Right. That's the Rubicon where it all changes.
Half the audience went on, and they just didn't believe anything after that.
But they're missing it.
I know.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
It just becomes so absurd.
Yeah. And what?
But what was that like working with Spike and Charlie?
Oh, they were great. They were great. They were great.
Mhm.
And they didn't argue because
But it was their idea to make that pivot, and you just helped them craft that so that it would operate.
No, they wanted they wanted the ending they first sent me.
Uh-huh.
And I said, no, that's out. But I sat down and I explained to them why. And they're reasonable people. And they sat there and, oh yeah, I suppose, yeah. And then they said, or you could do it without me. And if you
becomes a page one rewrite.
if you put me in the if I do not approve the last act, and you put me in that, then you will be faced with a lawsuit, and that I will win, and so they tried to do it without my character, and they sent me that draft without my character in it, and it really sucked. So then they came back and they said, yeah, well, we have to have you in the movie. And I said, well, then my conditions stand. They need to find a third act that works. And so I sat down with them and I gave notes, and they didn't argue. They were very not, polite and listening. And I didn't tell them what to write. I said, this is why this doesn't work. And this doesn't work, that doesn't work, whatever. And I see what you're trying to do, but you haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
And so anyway, but it all, at the end of the day, it all was,
right. And Brian Cox was your casting choice.
Well, yeah, what happened was I said, I can't tell you who you must cast because who knows whether that actor's available. I said, but I want you to give me a list. And what I needed to know was their casting philosophy. For all I knew, they saw for the McKee character, this could be the Dan Aykroyd, Danny DeVito school of casting, right? And so I said, send me a list. And it was the top 10 British actors of the day.
So you were on the same page tonally.
I had no idea. I've never imagined myself as Michael Caine.
But you need that gravamen.
Well,
right?
I saw what they were after. And Brian Cox's name was not on the list. And I said, okay, I see what you're after. Okay. I would like you to audition Brian Cox. And they said, who's Brian Cox? And I said, he's the best British actor you don't know.
Yeah.
And so they went to London and Dorchester had to come in the suite, and within 2 minutes, they knew that it was perfect.
And why Brian Cox over Michael Caine?
I'll tell you, actors. Wonderful actors. That on that list was Christopher Plummer. It was incredible. When they're playing an antagonist, there's always this subtext of love me, love me, love me. Yes, I'm a bad guy. Yes, I do terrible things, but my heart is in the right place.
A little break the fourth wall wink.
They don't have to do now. They're too good at that. They wouldn't. They wouldn't wink.
I'm not saying they actually would do that, but they're conveying
a certain
thing
going on, a certain suffering, a certain whatever. There would be the love me thing, and as wonderful as those actors are, that for me that would be fatal. I do not want my students to love me. I want them to respect me. I want them to learn from me, but I do not want to be loved. I don't want a bunch of people chasing me around, becoming, my flock. I hate that.
Mm-hmm.
I
know you hate the word guru, right? That gets applied
because
to you.
it's an insult to them. It's not only an insult to me, and in the ancient meaning of it, just meant teacher. But guru in the modern terms is somebody who gets innocent people to fall in love with them.
Yeah, it's pejorative.
And becomes and he milks them for all the money he can get. No, I don't want that. So I hate the word guru, and I don't want followers. I don't want that. If people, that's a sick relationship, the mentor-student thing, and that if it goes to the point where the student can't write without the mentor there, approving it or whatever the hell. I mean, how are you going to grow up and be a writer? Writer is somebody who stands on their own.
And also the audience at your seminars is populated with people who've won Emmys and Oscars who return and return and return to remind themselves or to work through a particular problem that they're having. Like, these are highly accomplished people that are sitting next to
and so the
brand
word
new
guru
people.
Not only insults me as a person who's preying on people, but it insults them as fools to be preyed on. When in fact, there's a tremendous amount of success and talent sitting in that room. And most of my students are over 40 years old. These are kids. These are pros.
Yeah.
And so anyway.
So Brian Cox is going to drop he's going to drop the hammer.
Right. Well, you see it now in Succession.
Yeah, it augured Logan Roy in many ways. I mean, there's a lot of similarities in that portrayal.
Brian Cox is a wonderful actor who does not do that love me thing. And I knew Brian, I met him up, he's a student of mine and came to lecture up in Glasgow. And I knew him from his performances on the stage in the West End. And small movies, because I lived in England for 10 years. And so that's how I knew Brian, because I'd seen him repeatedly on stage or screen. And he was a student. And I watched him in a play called Skylight, David Hare play. And I really admired that he's not asking for sympathy. And I could imagine another actor playing that character, woe is me, and I'm misunderstood, and I could imagine it, but he didn't. And so anyway, that's why Brian.
Yeah, iconic. I mean, were you happy with how it came out?
Oh, sure. I took my son Paul to a screening, and imagine what, it's one thing for me to see myself portrayed, but imagine for a son to see his father portrayed.
Mm-hmm.
And so after we went out to the parking lot, and I said, "So what did you think?" And Paul said, "Dad, he nailed you."
There you go.
Yeah.
Did you ever speak with Nicolas Cage about it?
No, I've never met him.
Yeah.
No.
It's interesting. No. I love it. I think it's fantastic. And, I'm a Charlie Kaufman fan and a Spike Jonze fan. And, that movie is a movie I probably revisit, every year or so.
Yeah.
But when you think about master storytellers, and I would consider both of those guys, among that group, often you hear about how they flex the rules, or they're the ones that are breaking the rules. So it's back to this idea that's, a theme in adaptation, which is the structure is the bad guy and the geniuses are the ones who are operating outside of it. And, I think I want to hear your perspective on this, because there's a lot of confusion, I think, around this. When you think about, whether it's Tarantino or Charlie Kaufman, they are all operating within a structure that might elude the average viewer, but in truth, they're all adhering to, time-tested tenets of good storytelling.
Sure. And, but that's the word rules, is another word like journey and other things that
Steve's taking off. See you, Steve.
yeah,
Thank you for coming.
I react again.
Great to see you.
There is no such thing in art. There are no rules. There's a form. And the form has a purpose. There's a painting, for example. Almost virtually all paintings are rectangular. Why? Because if they're square or circular, it reduces everything to a symmetry. Symmetry has no tension. It's boring to the eye, right? And so there's a form. The rectangular frame is designed to put objects in certain lines or colors or whatever you're working with in certain positions within that rectangle to create a tension and that holds the eye, moves the eye, right? And it's not a rule. Nobody says you have to paint in a rectangular frame. It's a form. It's used for a purpose. It creates tension. And so the people who think that storytelling has rules, and I really, I react against that. There are no rules. There's a form. That life goes out of balance at some point, and that it went out of balance makes us wonder how and why will these characters, if possible, restore the balance of life. And the story then is a struggle toward achieving that balance, positive or negative or something ironic in between. And so throwing life out of balance and the conflicts, the effort to put it back into balance is not a rule. It's a form. If life doesn't go out of balance, there's no story. It's a portrait, right? And so you can't say you have to throw the life out of balance is a rule. It's just it's the nature of the art form. It's the rectangular frame. It's the movement from imbalance toward balance is the rectangular frame of a story told in time, and and I try to get writers to understand that nobody's telling you how to write. There are no rules. If you write something that is absolutely wonderful, no matter what, and intelligent, sensitive people read it, your career will be made because it's absolutely wonderful. Okay, right, and you have captured something that is compelling. How you do that? There's a form, and for thousands of years, this is how people telling stories have shaped a story. And there's certain elements that are constant, but you could do it like like the film Betrayal. You could tell the story backwards if you want to. Betrayal is told backwards, right? And you remember Betrayal?
I don't know. I'm trying to remember. I don't think I saw that.
Starts with the first scene is a couple years after their affair, and where they were each married to somebody else, or she was married, and she says he knows. Her husband has just learned about their affair. Her husband is that character's best friend.
And then it works its way backwards.
And then it goes backwards in time until the film ends on Boy Meets Girl. And it works beautifully. It's an exercise in dramatic irony. at every point, we know more than the characters know.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how will these characters react? What made this? How will they react when they find out what we already know?
Got it.
So you can turn it on its head. In the book I wrote on character, I explored the whole spectrum of character, including radical characters from avant-garde, modernist, postmodernist plays, films, and novels, because that's choice.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to, you could write like Samuel Beckett, and you create absolutely radical characters. And I'm going to do the same thing in the next book on story. Is I'm going to show them the full spectrum, which includes absurdist.
Right. On the subject of dialogue, there are certain very talented writers who are super idiosyncratic in the way they write. Like I'm thinking of Mamet, Sorkin, again with Tarantino, dialogue that is incredibly poetic, but also dialogue that very much draws attention to itself, right? Like a Sorkin scene, like you know who wrote that scene when you read it or when you hear it.
But when you say you mean us people in the business,
I suppose. But if you're
the general audience,
any form of cinephile,
the general audience would not know that.
There's like a trademark staccato or Mametisms or the way that Tarantino writes. That
fellow writers,
they are the authors of those works, very much so. But
because you don't want to suggest, Rick, that when people go to see something by Tarantino or Sorkin, that the average person or watches this is saying, they go, Sorkin, Tarantino. They're not. They're into the story and
you don't think so with Tarantino, even?
Yeah, even with Tarantino.
That's interesting.
Yeah, they. But then I don't know. Movie fans are fans, and maybe there is some of that. But the reason I call attention to that is that I wouldn't want somebody that I'm teaching thinking that they should develop an eccentric style of dialogue that calls attention to itself.
That's what I'm getting at. It's one thing if you're a master, but other than that, it feels like artifice and distraction that's being driven by ego in a kind of look at me thing as opposed to serving the story.
Yeah, if it doesn't work, it certainly does. But then the other side of that coin is bad dialogue that calls attention to itself as bad dialogue, right?
Well, there's no shortage of that.
Dialogue sucks.
Like, why are movies so bad, Robert? Come on.
Why have they gotten
right now?
So bad?
Yeah. I mean, August was horrific. The tectonic plates of industry and the way in which
I don't know how long cinema will last as an art form. I think that in some time in the future, and I don't know how distant, cinema will be like ballet is today. It'll be minor, esoteric, artsy. I don't know, but it won't last. There's a lot of reasons. Film is so expensive that they have to. If they're going to spend $200 million, it's got to make $1 billion to be profitable. Literally, it's going to make 5 times the investment to turn a profit. And so you've got to think about, how can I get $1 billion worth of people to watch this thing? So the commercial imperative is driven by the nature of things, and it's not like long form television or long form streaming. You're asking people to get up out of their house, get in their car, drive somewhere, park, go to the movies at a certain time, whether it's convenient or not. And so it's got to be a subject matter and a genre that would be. That's why I wrote.
This is action.
That's why I wrote the book Action.
It is, it's a Star Wars, Marvel, Avatar universe that we're all living in, for better or worse.
Yep.
And the movies that are being made are movies at that massive scale that are either franchise spawning or franchise perpetuating. They're amusement park rides for the most part.
Yeah.
And because they cost so much, they have to be that successful, which means they have to appeal to the largest possible demographic, and they have to work in China and all of that. And, look, some of these movies I don't mean to be completely, I go see everything. I like seeing bad movies, even if it's just an exercise in trying to figure out why they're bad or why they've made certain choices.
There's some wonderful action films.
I love going to the movies, and I love a lot of these big movies, but it is interesting that action has you just came out with this book, Action. Action is the domineering genre that monopolizes most of what we see in the...
I don't know if it's domineering.
Well, yeah, okay. There you go.
Yeah. But also action merges with crime.
Well, comedy now also with all these big movies.
Right. War. And so action in our mixes with a number of different genres. It isn't all superheroes, or whatever. But I wrote that for people if they want to make movies, if they can master the form of action, mix it with other genres, or do it in a pure form, whether realistic or fantasy to whatever. That's where it is today, and so I would hope that we would see some good action, because when it's good, it's great. I love it.
Yeah, me too.
But television has sucked the audience away from going to the movies to see sensitive, character complex stories on the big screen.
Yeah. I want to see more movies like Michael Clayton. Those movies are not going to get made for the cinema.
No.
But while the aperture is closing and constricting on what is ending up at the Cineplex on Friday night, meanwhile in television it's expanded beyond in terms of the opportunities. I mean, it's basically infinite. And there is room for, would Michael Clayton be made as a 6-hour Netflix limited series? Maybe, but that's something I would watch too, right? But I want to see, I like my drama serious. I don't like comedy in my sci-fi. I want my hard-boiled shit. I like stuff about, I like espionage and CIA and MI6 and all, it's like, those are long form shows. They're not making aside from Mission Impossible. Like, you're not going to see that in the movie theater anymore.
No, but it isn't only the movies. I mean, there's novels,
of course,
sell more. People think that people have stopped reading. It's just not true. More novels are read and sold today. They're sold and read today than ever. People spend more time, with their on their computer screen reading novels than ever, or listening to the audio.
Two more things I want to get into with you, and then I'll release you to your life. And one of those things is, we've talked a lot about movies, the art and craft of writing, screenwriting, et cetera. Most people listening to this or watching this are not professional writers. Maybe they enjoy the movies, they read, et cetera. So I guess what I want to get at is like, why should they care about story? Why is story important? Why is thinking about story and taking seriously the art of storytelling something that is applicable to the average person?
Stories, I think, as we discussed earlier, are equipment for living. And so why do we go to the storyteller? Why do we read novels, go to the theater, film, television? It's to give us a deeper and deeper understanding of what is absurd and comic and, right, what is tragic and dark and painful, whatever, to see the full spectrum of life beyond anything we could possibly live. You get to enter into worlds you could never, ever know by the thousands. And so story expands your humanity, and it also enriches your understanding of how and why people in the world do the things they do to equip you to live more successfully. The other is that the more you read, as you watch, when you go to the theater, try to challenge yourself as an audience or a reader to read or to experience, to be an audience to something a little higher, better in some fashion, more complex, more difficult than what you just read or watched last month. And the wonderful thing about story is it's a museum. If you wish, you could go back and read the Odyssey or the Iliad. You could read the great plays written 2,500 years ago in Athens. And you can go back, to the greatest of writers, Mark Twain and Tolstoy, and it's all there waiting for you. And every one of those great works is as valid today as it was when it was written. But you're going to have to learn to read in that language. If you're going to read Mark Twain, you're going to have an ear for that lingo. Edgar Allan Poe, you have to have an ear for a whole different. And as a result, the best of the what I do today is just to save myself some time or to give myself some choices. I just pay attention to awards. The Pulitzer Prize, the Booker, Emmys, whatnot.
Right. You mean just as a gatekeeper to quality?
To see who's
right.
And I look not for the winners, but for the nominees. You can go online and see, what were the 10 novels nominated for the long list for the Pulitzer, for the Booker Prize, or for the Whitbread and others. And it gives you some guidance. Otherwise, it's just totally random.
Right.
So I do that. It's just, don't have to do that. But you want to challenge yourself to experience more and more fascinating, even if it's difficult, and a really good film, a really good novel is worth seeing or reading more than once. And just like it's the same thing. The second time you see a really fine film, it's a whole other movie.
Sure.
Same thing with a novel. The second time you read a really fine novel, you can't.
Well, it also depends on the phase of life you're in. We're forced to read, a certain set of novels, throughout high school and college. We're at a certain phase of life. Maybe we can connect with it, maybe we can't. But, now many years later, some of those themes that seemed irrelevant to you then become highly resonant.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
The theater is literally a museum. What sustains the theater is we've got all these great playwrights from Tennessee Williams and Arthur Miller and Lillian Hellman and William Inge and on of the 20th century, Eugene O'Neill, and the past, Shakespeare first amongst them. And the theater keeps going, keeps alive by bringing them back, these great plays from the past. And you see, when you watch Ibsen or Strindberg today, you watch a play like The Father, and you see the ugliest marriage in the history of marriages,
Mm-hmm.
and written in 1890. And it's fearsome, and it's shocking and funny,
Right.
too, right?
It's always shocking to read something that's quite old and realize that it is as of the moment as anything.
And it
Because
just teaches
humanity
you,
doesn't change,
you
right?
the lesson that everybody has to learn
Yeah.
is that nothing changes.
Right.
Human beings are human beings are human beings. And they're not evolving. Society is, but human beings are not evolving.
Right. We got the same hardware.
Yeah, that's right.
It's fascinating to me. Clearly, you're super intelligent and insightful and witty, and you have a sort of brash confidence about you. And we didn't even get into much of your background, but you were an actor, you were a theater director and a director. You've worked in many capacities in the industry, outside the industry. You could have, to me, it feels like you could have become successful at any of these things that you chose. You could be running a studio. You could have become, a professional screenwriter, a director, a producer, et cetera. You make this decision to make your life about story. And I'm just interested in why did you make that decision?
I found what I do best. Yes, I could have been, I directed over 60 plays, and they were very successful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could have directed in the theater and then maybe moved on to film, television, whatever, and spent my life doing it. And I'm sure I would have been fine. Here's what happened. I was a busy screenwriter in Hollywood. I sold every screenplay, I optioned every screenplay I wrote. One of them I've optioned recently again for the 5th time.
Mm.
Okay.
It was written when?
In the 80s.
Wow. And it's been re-optioned.
Yeah, people love it. People love it. And but they don't make it. All the television that I wrote got made. And so I could see my work on screen, and I recognized that, this is of quality, and it's professional, and it's fine, but it's not Ingmar Bergman,
mm-hmm.
who, in my judgment, is the greatest screenwriter in the history of the movies. But I discovered that by writing about, lecturing and writing about writing, I had insights, and I could make sense of things for people in ways others couldn't, and that if I pursue that, I love doing it, and if I pursue it, I could be the Ingmar Bergman of writing about writing.
Mm.
And so I did what my instincts led me to do, which is to become the best at what I can do. And so And so that's why I write about writing, because I love doing it, and it matters apparently. So I remember that I made a choice. I can remember it very clearly, and I thought, I could pursue screenwriting, and I was making a living at a house in Santa Monica, and, swimming pool and all that. And maybe someday, who knows, do something special. But
there was something about teaching and the interaction with the students that lit you up in a new and different way.
It's really it lifted my heart in the, to see their faces while I'm lecturing, and to see light bulbs going on as they get it, and they literally go, they gasp at times, right?
Yeah. Well, it is a performance, right? It is theater.
Yeah, there's that.
You're writing, you're performing, there's jokes, there's an entertainment aspect to it. So, it kind of pulls on all of those skill sets.
Yeah. And they understand, it helps them understand what I tell you, the pros who come into the lectures that are already, successful.
Not the least of which being people like Akiva Goldsman and like David Bowie took your class, right?
Yes, yeah, it was great.
That's unbelievable.
Did
you interact with him?
Yeah, of course. He was one of the best laughers that I've ever had. I mean, the lectures are, as you were pointing out, full of comedy or humor, wit, and David Bowie just belly laughs. It was incredible. Literally, his knees would come up to his chin. He'd laugh so hard.
Did you see Moon Age Daydream yet? Have you seen the documentary, Brett Morgan's documentary? Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about Bowie because that movie is a work of brilliance. You have to check it out. Yeah, it's incredible. It's truly incredible. It's a documentary. It's Bowie's life, but it's, I think, to coin like what Brett Morgan, the filmmaker, said about it, he was trying to make a movie about David Bowie if David Bowie was making a movie about his life. So it's a very surrealistic kind of sonic experience that is nonlinear in any way, but which really conveys the sensibility of this artist. Yeah, I highly recommend you check it out. But anyway, I interrupted you.
No. He's the perfect example of what I was talking about. That it's very moving for me to see someone get it, and you see it in their eyes in an instant. It's not, there's this look. And writers who have been, they're in their 30s and 40s, 50s, or whatever, often come to me on the break or after, and they're elated, and they say, "I solved my script. I solved my novel at about 11 o'clock this morning because of and."
It's priceless.
And that's, I live for that.
Yeah. Do you think about legacy at all as you're kind of concluding this tour? And
there's
coming
books.
To the end
There's books, and all of my lectures are recorded. And now that I've, this is the farewell tour, so I'm not going to do live performances anymore. And so now, if people want, we've recorded everything,
right?
And so all of that is out there for them, and the books. Whether I've read all my books for the audio version, and so there's the they can read them or listen to them, whatever. But every writer who writes fiction or nonfiction would like to think that what they expressed, what they had to say, will live on after them for some period of time, at least, not forever. I mean, it can't all be Shakespeare, but that it's a form of immortality, or at least a temporary immortality. And so I don't think about my legacy because I've already taken care of that.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote the books. And that's my legacy, and
they will live on.
Yeah, and Story is now 25 years old, the book, and it sells as much or more today than it did 25 years ago.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
So if I had died right after I wrote Story, it would still be doing well 25 years later.
Mm-hmm.
So I won't have any. I can't say I won't have any regrets because I made a lot of mistakes in life. But when I die, I will die with a sense of satisfaction. I did what I set out to do.
Mm. Well, I think that's a good, beautiful place to end it. Thank you. It really was an honor to spend time with you.
Oh, it was great fun.
And,
it was great fun.
I really enjoyed it. Best of luck with the end of this tour. I know you got a big day tomorrow. So I appreciate you taking time. Everybody should definitely pick up Action, The Art of Excitement for Screen, Page, and Game. And don't forget
and
Story,
5
of course,
other
which you've been
books.
talking about. Yeah, you've got dialogue, you've got character. We didn't even get into storynomics and the power of story in business and all of that. Maybe you'll come back and talk to me some more about that. But crazy respect for everything that you've done in the world, and I think it's a great service. And it was just brilliant to meet you today. So thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.
Peace.